Welcome to YourTown television program where we're featuring the Naval Postgraduate School, its leadership, research, and its faculty. For this segment, we'd like to focus on one of the highlighting aspects of our research, which is the Consortium for Robotics, Unmanned Systems, Education, and Research. And I've got two great guests here to discuss this important research line. Dr. Ray Buettner, who is the Director of Cruiser, and Lyla Engelhorn, who is the Associate Director. Welcome, both of you. Before we jump in and start talking about the consortium, though, let's talk a little bit about yourself. So, Lyla, let's start with you. How did you come to the Naval Postgraduate School and start to work there?
Well, I got my master's degree in public policy with the Panetta Institute for Public Policy, and part of the degree program was an internship. And I could do my internship to further something I'd already done, which at that point was marine stewardship. I'd worked for the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I'd also worked a lot in the arts, for theaters, marketing and development. Or I could explore something brand new. And I chose to explore something brand new.
Okay.
And I came and interviewed with you, actually, because a former student had done an internship through you to explore different opportunities, and you placed me with the Maritime Information Sharing Task Force as my internship. And I ended up doing my applied policy analysis for my degree on maritime domain awareness and the regulation around it.
So the work you did at MPS helped your work at the Panetta Institute for Public Policy for your graduate degree?
Absolutely. It was applied research in the realm of public policy.
Great. Now, Ray, you are actually a retired naval officer, so tell us a little bit about your career and then what you did afterwards.
So I enlisted in the Navy right out of high school. I served in the submarine force doing nuclear power operations. I was a machinist mate first class when I went to Idaho to learn how to operate naval propulsion plants and to teach others to operate them.
Because there's a lot of ships in Idaho.
Right, right. So it turns out when they first started this idea, they thought they should do it with not a lot of people around.
Oh, for the nuclear power part.
For the nuclear power plants, right? So there was actually at the time the Idaho Department of Energy National Laboratory was out there in the desert, and the first aircraft carrier and submarine plants were actually prototyped out there in the desert. So they were still used for training. So after serving a tour on the USS Francis Scott Key, I went to train people.
Now the Francis Scott Key is what?
The Francis Scott Key is a ballistic missile submarine, or she was a ballistic missile submarine.
Oh, right. So you went under the water.
So I did my submarine time with the Francis Scott Key, and then went to the land-based prototype to train folks. While I was out there, using the Navy's tuition assistance programs, I was able to finish my degree and apply for a commission as a commissioned officer and the naval flight officer. So I went to
So what's
Oklahoma.
a naval flight officer? Tell us what that is.
So when you fly in the Navy, you do it as basically you're either the pilot or you're air crew. In the air crew, there are enlisted air crewmen that do things, and then there are officers. The officers are naval flight officers. In my case, I was an airborne communications officer and navigator for the E-6 TACAMO aircraft, which is a 707 four-engine jet, actually operating out of Oklahoma. So as a Navy guy, I did a full tour in Idaho.
And then you went to Oklahoma. Sure, absolutely. A lot of oceans in both states.
Right?
That's right.
So finished that up. I had a very good tour in the squadron. I was actually nominated for a White House job. I came out runner-up, didn't quite get it, and the detailer said, "How would you like to go to graduate school?" And I wound up at Monterey as a lieutenant studying information warfare systems engineering. And while I was there, as NPS tours often are, life-changing experience, I was able to go to Brussels for an international conference. I got to go to several other universities for conferences, one of those being Stanford. While I was at Stanford, the professor there thought that I asked different types of questions than the typical graduate students do, and invited me post-Navy career to come back to Stanford and work on my PhD.
Great.
So, I after left NPS, went out to an aircraft carrier, did a dissociated sea tour, so for flyers, we get assigned to ships.
You actually have to go to sea sometime.
Now, as a submarine guy, I thought it was cheating a little. I was like, I've already done this thing. But had a good tour, finished up, came back to NPS as an instructor, retired out of NPS, finished up my degree, and joined the faculty.
So why did you decide to get a degree, a PhD at that point?
So it was very interesting. One of the things I was struck by when I was a student at NPS is the impact of well-argued, compelling evidence to change policy in the way we do business. And professors like John Arquilla in the Defense Analysis Department, Cynthia Irvine in the Computer Science Department, Jeff Knorr in the Electrical Engineering Department. They were my instructors when I was there, and I saw the respect they got, and then NPS being kind of unique because we're outside the food fights of the Beltway. We can offer objective, evidence-based opinions back to the leadership. And that struck me as a really interesting way to move forward with my career. The second part was the student body. We have an amazing student body, adult learners. Everybody's there to better themselves for the good of the country. So it's just a really motivating place to be, and it's been a wonderful second career.
Fantastic. Well, both of you are associated with cruisers, so what we'd like to do now is show about a 1.5-minute clip of an orientation of the Consortium for Robotics, Unmanned Systems Education and Research to give us an appreciation for just the depth and the breadth of that topic area.
The Consortium for Robotics and Unmanned Systems Education and Research, or simply CRUISER, promotes the education of U.S. naval officers in the design, development, and employment of robotic, autonomous, and remotely controlled systems. We do this through various fora that bring together defense-related advanced education, research, and commercial innovations. Serving as an incubator, CRUISER seeds and advances the exploration of innovative and fresh ideas that support the efficient attainment of mission objectives. Faculty, researchers, and students work together in the classroom, in the lab, and in the field to develop innovative ways of combining old, current, and emerging technologies to extend the commander's reach in the battlefield. Field experimentation gives us the opportunity to test the viability of the technical ideas. Workshops and panel discussions offer the chance to explore the boundaries of ethical, legal, and policy issues associated with these concepts. Officer education in sciences, technology, and operations is essential as we move forward into a quickly changing world. CRUISER creates a unity of effort in the massing of creative and innovative intellectual firepower. Be a part of the solution. Be a part of CRUISER.
Well, that gave us a good appreciation for the broad scope of CRUISER, but Ray, tell us a little bit about the origin of CRUISER, why it was stood up, and what exactly does it address in its many varieties.
So the genesis of CRUISER was a discussion at the Naval Postgraduate School with then Undersecretary of the Navy, Mr. Robert Work. And Mr. Work is now the Deputy Secretary of Defense.
Actually, I think he's acting Secretary of Defense now, right?
So he may be. I'm not sure, depending on when this goes. I know Congress is... Mr. Mattis is about to be...
the Secretary of Defense. That's right. Yes. That's right. You're right.
So, so Mr. Work was being briefed about the great job NPS does in its field experimentation program, which was started by Dr. Dave Netzer and a couple of colleagues at the Naval Postgraduate School, of bringing together academics, industry, and government folks and focusing on a problem set. And Mr. Work thought that was amazing and basically wanted to know, could we do the same thing around robotics and unmanned systems? And his concern was that the Navy and the military not fall behind, kind of as we did in the computer age, where we helped invent the internet, and then we're not even a big enough customer to get special deals with Microsoft anymore, right? So the idea was, can we do the same thing in robotics? Can we have a community of interest that keeps us connected to industry and to the academic world and keeps them informed about the challenges, especially the maritime-related challenges of robotics and autonomous systems, while informing government about that leading edge? So maybe we don't fall quite so far behind, if you will, the leading trend. And so I was part of that presentation. He asked me to show up. So working with my colleagues at NPS, we took him a proposal. We got his approval to go off, and we spend approximately $5 million a year now supporting research across the campus and relationships with other universities and industry around robotics and unmanned systems. Big program, new idea, didn't know how to start it, so we got a very bright captain at the Naval Postgraduate School, retired, named Jeff Kline, as the first director of CRUISER, and you did an excellent job running that program and setting it up within the Navy so that it was positioned for success. And,
well, that's why we feature it as one of the first research items, of course.
So that's a good one. That's a good one. But all kidding aside, you did a wonderful job setting that up. I was able, after completing tenure at the school, because I was a non-tenured faculty member, I was able to take over as the director, and with Dr. Janine Davidson as the Undersecretary of the Navy, we just launched CRUISER 2.0. So we're good for another 5 years right now, unless big things change across the Navy, helping the Navy and the Naval Postgraduate School stay on top of the robotics revolution.
So, Lyla, is everything that Cruiser does technical?
Absolutely not. Cruiser covers from technical to ethical and everywhere in between. We structure our activities along what you titled an innovation thread, where we start each thread with concept generation. What is the next big idea? What could be eminently useful and help with the challenges that the warfighters face?
Well, you mentioned ethical side of that.
Yes.
Describe some of the activities that go along with Cruiser that addresses some of the ethical components of autonomous warfare systems.
Well, I think because of our unique place in military academia, we're a very safe forum for more open discussions. Lots of stakeholders who are very informed about what we can do, and it provides us an opportunity to discuss, should we, and what are the ethical ramifications of taking any particular action in a future scenario involving unmanned systems, because it's a space we haven't truly explored. And there are a lot of very boisterous opinions on all sides, and it allows us the opportunity to really discuss what's behind those opinions at this point.
Well, Ray, Lyla had mentioned taking the concepts from the generation side itself all the way to testing and potentially field experimentation. Can you describe a little bit about that innovation thread?
Yeah, absolutely. So we move from the concept generation phase, we get our ideas, and basically we toss those out. So NPS professors, students can look at those ideas and then propose how they might explore the concepts and make it a reality. Might be building a prototype, might be running an exercise, might be coordinating with others in the Navy to explore resources. And we also share that information with the Office of Naval Research, our colleagues at warfare centers such as the Undersea Warfare Center up in Keyport, or the Systems Center Pacific down in San Diego. We share that information around the community, and then we get proposals back to do research in those areas. And Cruiser supports the research in those areas. So, for example, next month we'll be doing the first ever, we think, on the planet, autonomous swarm versus autonomous swarm dogfight. 2 swarms of vehicles, no human controllers, battling in the skies down at Camp Roberts.
Well, now, we'd set a record about a year and a half ago for that as well, for having 50 unmanned aerial vehicles.
Correctly. Yeah. So we flew for the first time 50 completely autonomous independent vehicles carrying out a mission set, no human controllers. And they were all, if you will, on the same team. So what's changed for next month is, for the first time, a team from Georgia Tech Research Institute has programmed in combat behaviors for one side to attempt to use, and the Naval Postgraduate School team is programmed in another. And we have a computer system that will help score, if you will, the battle for the dogfight as they engage in the skies.
Well, now, will the UAV color have the proper colors of Georgia Tech and the proper colors of Naval Postgraduate School?
Yeah, the blue and gold and black and gold. We've stuck to the traditional red and blue to be good to the taxpayers, so we haven't got any new paint out. But the flag's flying at the camps for the two teams that have to launch the vehicle. So no one controls them in the air. They figure that out on their own. But we do have our teams that are launching them.
Well, Lyla, Ray mentioned Georgia Tech. So obviously Cruiser is not just military or not just the Naval Postgraduate School. Can you tell us some of the membership of it and how large it is?
Absolutely. We're just over 3,000 members, and membership in the community of interest is free and open to anyone who has an interest in robotics and autonomous systems, from other DoD commands within the Navy to major industry players to other academic institutions and to garage hobbyists who are maybe interested in developing a new unmanned aerial system.
So our local high schools have robotics clubs. Do they
Certainly.
participate at all?
They do, absolutely. We have been able to interact with the local high school teams, and they're really impressive in their work and what they accomplish in less than a year to take to robotics competitions. And our teams around here, I'm proud to say, have done very well at those competitions.
Sometimes our 15-year-olds are even smarter than our 25-year-olds
Absolutely.
when it comes to this.
Yeah.
They come up with some really great stuff. So do you recommend people, if they're interested in joining Cruiser, go to the website or just Google Cruiser?
Yeah,
and that'll come up?
cruiser.mps.edu. They can
Right.
click Join Cruiser. They're welcome to attend our MPS Cruiser monthly meetings by our digital learning platform. So you log in and you can attend.
Oh, so it's a web-based
It's a
attendance.
web-based, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And we also, at MPS, have a very robust internship program that high school and undergraduate and graduate students might be interested in, that get them involved in all sorts of programs on the campus, not just robotics.
So you also mentioned, when we're talking about the innovation thread, that you come up with ideas in some sort of a workshop. Can you talk a little bit about the Cruiser workshop that occurs
sure.
every year?
Every year, generally in September, I gather together early career engineers from industry and other DoD labs and junior officers, and give them a near future scenario, generally written by Professor Jeff Kline.
I make stuff up.
But you make stuff up so well, based on what's actually happening in the world. It is based in reality and based on fact and what could happen. So it grounds their thinking in possible reality, which I think really helps the process. So I split them up into teams, 6 or 7 per team, and ask them to dig into the problem, find where the gap area is, what unmanned system might assist in that gap area, and then at the end of those 3.5 days, they propose their best ideas that they came up with. They're not just free-form brainstorming.
Right.
I try to structure it and facilitate their efforts along the design thinking path, and it's a system that was developed in Silicon Valley with software development that I think is very useful. They start with really investigating the problem, discovering what they can within that problem space, and I think having operators who've been out in combat situations, mixing those with early career engineers who've been in labs trying to develop things is really a robust area for that sort of exploration, because sometimes it's the first time those who've actually used some of this equipment out in the field have met some of the people who are developing and building it, and vice versa. And it's a really ripe area for discussion. They then focus in on where they want to help and fill a gap, and based on their shared knowledge, develop something that could potentially be useful. They then prototype that, initially just on paper, and present that. And then we give that out to the greater community of interest, like Ray said, put that out and say, okay, how might you actually build some of this stuff? How do we prove this concept? And then we give seed money to those good ideas and let them go out and field test it and see what happens.
Well, Dr. Ray Buettner, Lyla Engelhorn, thank you very much for being our guest today on YourTown television program and talk about Cruiser, the Consortium for Robotics, Unmanned Systems, Education, and Research. I'm your host, Jeff Kline from the Naval Postgraduate School.